Well, thanks so much for coming, everybody, and it's great to be on the stage with some tiger heroes. It's great to see you, Alan, too, here particularly. But let's talk first a little bit about the film, and then we'll get to there'll be dessert, but you can dive in, of course. Extraordinary work, hard work. I mean, you've both been a lot of places and made some interesting films, but was there some moment here where you felt this is not working? Was there some moment when it was particularly wrenching or difficult? Was it political or insects or what? There always has to be some moment.
First of all, the thing I'm most proud about in this film is that all members of the crew came back uneaten. And it was, I'd lost a man once in Africa.
Really?
It was a terrible experience. And I didn't want to repeat it. And the crew stuck it out. They were basically a New York City crew, and they had no fear of tigers.
Why?
we got pretty close. You remember that there's a scene where the boat kind of, we kind of moved past tiger footprints, right? And in fact, we had gone up that little reach 15 minutes maximum, maybe 10 minutes before, and there were not tiger prints there. And when we came back, you could even see, as the camera looks into the forest, you can even see the vegetation moving behind the most forward vegetation. And that was a friend of ours watching us over there.
Wow. So Alan, I'm going to bring you in here, and just how did you connect initially with these guys?
George, how did we connect? I actually forgot how we connected. All I remember is when George approached, when the idea about doing a film was broached to me, I said no immediately, because I had sworn off. I had done numerous films by that time, regular documentaries with National Geographic, with BBC, with Animal Planet, and I didn't want to do them anymore. I realized, or I believed, that those kinds of films were having no effect on really helping me or helping conservation, that my time was better spent actually being in the field than playing an actor in some film, even if it was a great, and these were great documentaries. I loved working with BBC and Nat Geo, but I didn't see any effect. In 30 years of working in the jungles, I hadn't seen any real effect. They were for the believers already. They were not out there. They were not films that connected. And George Butler, who I knew by reputation, said, this is not that kind of a film. I want to do something different. All my films are something different. And I watched his films, and indeed, of course I knew Pumping Iron, because I'd been a weightlifter since I was a kid. But all his films were very different. And I agreed finally, believing or hoping, and it came to pass, that this would be a different film. This could be a film that gets out to the public and connects with not just people who love wildlife already, or who believe in conservation already, but connects at a deep emotional level with anybody. And I believe the film has done that, but all of you are the best judges of that.
Thank you so much.
So I want to ask you about the planning and or the storyline. I've been making films for the last 6 years with students at Pace University, where every spring on the spring break, instead of sitting on a beach in Cancun, they made films about sea turtle conservation in a poor town in Mexico, in Baja, about shrimp farming in Belize, using a new model that's less impactful on the environment. And some of the films, we kind of know the story when we're going out. Some of them, though, the story comes out afterwards. There's some moment or some person becomes the story. Obviously, you had the person. But there were some moments in this film that clearly were not planned or didn't feel like you stumbled on some things that were pretty interesting. There were the moment in the village. For me, I don't know about the audience, but one of the most powerful moments was when Alan asks those villagers who had been attacked so much and saw that film, and that guy was so roused, and he said it was euphoria. And then he said, "Do you still want tigers?" And they were like, "Yeah, absolutely." That was amazing. Was that? How did that feel at the moment when you were shooting it?
Well, when we were shooting in the village, we obviously didn't speak the local dialect, so it was difficult to understand what their side of the story was. But then Alan wisely went back and, using an interpreter, got right to the bottom of this, which is to say, the villagers value the tigers enormously. If the tigers were not there, there would be no Sundarbans, no movie, no mangrove swamp. It would just become a World Heritage Site. So it was, we were very lucky.
Yeah, and the kids, the little Gandhi presentation was also pretty amazing too. How did that come about? Did you hear about that, or how did you?
I think that when you make documentary films, strange things happen. And I had made a couple of scouting trips, and I had tried to put together an educational day about tigers and see if the students would be able to paint some tigers for us or something like that. And instead, this magnificent local grassroots.
Well, they did paint. Alan went and talked to them, and they painted tigers, and it was a kind of a 5th grade, what was it, 8th grade class. They painted lovely tigers, and it was very cute and sweet, and we filmed it. And then we all came out into the yard, and then they put on this amazing show for us, which nobody expected. And all of a sudden, this little Gandhi statue appears. And in India, that statue is out in the crossroads in front of, maybe 5 towns out of 10. That very statue of that kid. So it's kind of wonderful.
This was really an evolve. I could tell you, at least from my perspective, maybe George already had a lot of things in mind about this film, but this was not choreographed, most of it. If George had come to me and said, "I wanted to do a film, and we're going to film you in your innermost private sanctum of a cabin, half naked, working out and throwing knives, and we're going to film you talking about your childhood and your stuttering and your leukemia," I would have turned it down. And in fact, my wife was furious at me for letting them get into my privacy as much as that. But but it was good. It was necessary. It was necessary to connect on the human level as well as the wildlife level. But I'm not even sure George, or it was planned that way from the beginning. It became, I didn't want it to be about me. I wanted it to be about tigers, and yet it couldn't just be. There are more documentaries about tigers than any other mammal in the world, any other animal, literally. I didn't want another tiger documentary. So this evolved. It took me, George, and I told George many times, both of these guys had me doing and saying things which I hadn't exposed since I was a kid, well, ever, actually. And it wasn't always comfortable to me, and it sure wasn't comfortable knowing it was going to be exposed to the public. But I'll do anything to try to save these tigers. I mean, if this works, then this will work. We got to do something.
I just have to say something, and part of it is that I'm extraordinarily grateful to George for asking me to shoot this with him. It was an amazing experience. We can talk about some of how it was done, but it was an amazing experience. But one of the main pieces of that experience, one of the main reasons that I'm grateful to George, was to put me in the same space with this guy for so long. It was really just wonderful. just completely wonderful.
How long was it?
Was close to 2 months.
Yeah. The two words that were very powerful in the middle of the film were need and greed. And one thing you seem to capture, you seem to be right on the nexus of the tentacles of the Asian demand for tiger contraband getting in there. There were some scenes and some discussions that really demonstrated that in one place that wasn't there yet. It was mostly tigers were predating on people, and we had these issues with depleted game. But then there was that hint that you were actually watching it happen. Was that your sense in putting it together, that you're seeing that out? Because that is, with that, you have to have both to have whether it's ivory or rhino horn, bluefin tuna. So many of these, you have to have the pull, and then you have to have the need on the ground.
I was walking backwards in the Sundarbans one Sunday morning, and Tom Hurwitz was walking backwards towards me, and I fell down a slope, and Tom went by with his crew, just what he was supposed to be doing, and I felt something underneath my coat, and it was this recently shed skin of a king cobra. And I had fallen right into his hole. So, and one other thing I'll mention, there's obviously danger from tigers, but we were out very late one evening, so we stopped at one of the Forest Service cabins, and I was put upstairs with a mosquito net, and I woke up in the morning, and there was a wasp this long inside the mosquito net, and I reached very carefully underneath the bed, and I got my Nike shoes up, and I had to do it one time, and I killed the wasp. And there are dozens of stories like that, but you do not want to be part of those stories.
Can I address something, though, a little about the tiger? The tiger trade is a whole story in itself, and one that really, if we had taken that road, it would have closed off a lot of paths that we ended up with. This film, one of my deals with George, and what they wanted was that this was not just going out and doing a documentary. I'd never been to this area before. In fact, I had to promise him I wouldn't go to this area until this film was made. This was a real survey. This was a true entry into a place I wanted to figure out if it was worth me and my organization Panthera to get into and to truly try to help tigers. Because for years I had written the Sundarbans off, partly due to the advent of what's going to probably happen there in the face of climate change, and partly due to the fact that it's completely isolated from all other tiger populations, and thus is a fragment. But I was missing the most important things, and I only realized that later. Due to this film, Panthera is now in Bangladesh. Well, we're in India as well, but India doesn't need us much. We're on the Bangladesh side mostly, and because we actually have an in-country presence, trying to live in there and get at tigers, we are running into the tiger. We're having a lot of issues with corruption, with everything I've seen for years in tigers, with the dark side of the tiger issue, with very corrupt government officials, with corruption, with poaching, and with the tiger trade. If we were to at all gone down that road more than we did, then we wouldn't have been able to do this kind of a film, because then it would be an undercover film. And that's been done many times in many places.
So I want to be sure we have some time for audience questions. But my one last one was, I noticed Senator Kerry's, Secretary of State Kerry's name was in the credits. And you had obviously, you've known him since 1964 or thereabouts, and did a film about him too. Did he help? I know the State Department is very involved with wildlife trafficking efforts. Did he help in any particular way to facilitate getting into country or any of those things?
I sent an email to John, who I'd known since about 1960, and I said we needed help with this film, and he's always been so helpful amongst his friends and sometimes his enemies. And we got very interested in bringing some force to bear. And so John got my urgent email. The next morning, the American ambassador to India and the American ambassador to Bangladesh invited me to lunch, and we went on from there.
That's great. Good for him, and good for you. So now I think there are roving mics.
We have a question right here.
Okay, great.
Hello, Alan. Thank you so much for all the work you do for these amazing creatures. I wanted to ask, you mentioned how in your previous documentaries you felt like they weren't getting the effect that was necessary if, say, if like pretty much all 250 people in this audience were as moved as I was by the film. What would you suggest would be the most like effective or helpful way for us to help, whether the tiger's just in the Sundarbans or the species as a whole?
That's the hardest question I get every single time I'm up in front of audiences, because everybody tells, because I know that I have to say something other than just send us money, which I will say, because if Panthera has to work, we need funds. But there's a whole level of advocacy that needs to be done by people, by the general public, and I don't mean advocacy just in terms of going out on marches or participating in carrying banners, but advocacy with bills, with politics, with who you vote for, with the whole concept of having an intact, stable world, which relates in a way I have no time for now to our own health and human welfare and the future of our generations, your generation and your children. It's got to become embedded in people more than it is. It can't be just taught. It can't just be seen in a film. It's got to be felt inside. And that has to happen with the younger generations. But people of all ages need to be advocates every day in every way for wildlife and for the wild world in everything they do, be it at the voting booth, be it how they carry out their everyday lives, what they buy, how they influence climate change. I mean, just the fact that climate change is such a question mark, and 50% of human beings, of people in the United States is just incredible. It doesn't mean people are ignorant. It means we're not messaging properly. We're not making people understand and feel things properly. So what can people do? What can 250 people do? 250 people, apart from sending money, can change into an advocacy group of thousands and thousands of people just by how they talk, what they do, what they say online, social media, who they vote for. So that's what changes. The problems with the documentaries, and they're phenomenal. I'm not against documentaries of Nat Geo and BBC and all the others. They're wonderful. I just have to feel personally, with the limited time I've got in life, that this is having an effect other than to the people who care already, who do it already. It's got to be having an effect beyond that and beyond those kind of people. I think this film has that possibility.
By the way, is there a prospect of this being shown in Bangladesh or India? Do you know?
We haven't. We're still putting together our teams for new docs and various other film festivals. We probably won't get into Bangladesh till sometime late next year.
But it's doable. Oh, great.
Oh, it has to be.
Yeah, I would think. Yeah.
It's not only doable, it just has to be, even if I hand carry it.
Next question.
My opinion, this problem with wildlife is one only problem. It's human corruption. That's the problem with wildlife. Anyway, we see a lot of mud in the movie, and it's just impressive in many ways. My question is with the guards that went with you on this morning shoot. They had guns. Was the tranquilizer or a real gun? And what will happen if the tiger will show up?
Oh, they were real guns. Nobody will move in the Sundarbans without real guns. They were very real guns. And you heard that. And that guy who was cocking his gun as we were walking wasn't for the camera. In fact, I wanted to get closer to the tiger. He was not a scared man. He just, these tigers show more aggression, or should I say less fear. It's not really more aggression, but it's less fear of human beings, it seems, than tigers other places which are much more hunted. Those guns are real, and you would want, I would want a real gun with me. A tranquilizer gun would do nothing. If you have a tiger, in fact, a real gun doesn't do a lot either if a tiger really wants to kill you, but it would stop a tiger and make it pause. A tranquilizer wouldn't do anything. Tranquilizers, unlike in the movie, takes quite a while for a tranquilizer to take effect, as you saw with that tiger, which was shot with a tranquilizer.
Right. Next question.
We have one right up here.
I'm wondering if the root cause is the consumption in Asia of these bones. And so I really want to ask, who is the Alan Rabinowitz of China? Could a film be made with that person in Mandarin or in whatever? So how do you reach, you're reaching the West, which is to be applauded. What partner do you have to reach the rest of the world?
No, absolutely. George, we talked about this, and these guys are better able to address that, because that's a real concern of mine. Reaching the West only helps, frankly, in terms of fundraising or advocacy or that kind of thing. But the East, and there is lots of awareness in China and in Asia, and they want to know more. George, what do you think of the possible plans for getting this out into possibly Chinese, into other languages?
Our latest information is that half of Goldman Sachs senior executives are working on a huge park in Western China. And Hank Paulson, the former CEO of Goldman Sachs, was very interested in the film I made on the ivory-billed woodpecker. But you have to take one thing at a time. Even with Pumping Iron, which is one of the most influential commercial films ever made, I think, it took 10 years to keep it going. And we're exploring doing an IMAX, which would go to science centers across the country and abroad. And it's something we've really got our eyes on. And when I say something that we have our eyes on, Caroline Alexander, who wrote this, who wrote The Endurance, who found the photographs that formed the movie and the book, and she's not here this evening, but she's been talking to a lot of people and does a lot of work with National Geographic and other magazines. So there's more to come. We don't give up easily, and we're getting better. The last 10 screenings of this film have been to overflow audiences, and people have been turned away, and that's a very good sign.
Can I just say one? Sorry, George.
Order your ticket early.
No, I just wanted to, your point is extremely well taken, but while with the tigers, the primary driving force of their decline could be said to be primarily the Asian and specifically Chinese medicinal trade. That doesn't explain the decline in lions and cheetahs and jaguars and everything else. That goes to a core root problem that's beyond certain cultural norms. And here, look at Cecil. I mean, trophy hunting. It goes way beyond it. It goes to how we basically live with nature and how we view it as apart from us instead of being a part of us and a part of our children's health and future health. And that's what we really have to get at, those core values.
And just briefly, yeah. Just briefly on China, there is change in China. There's still more than enough demand to suck up all the remaining tiger pelts. But Wild Aid is another NGO that's working on the ground with Chinese representatives. They've done amazingly effective social media campaigns using Yao Ming, the basketball star. I was in Beijing a couple of years ago with these TV stars from a teen show, kids show that unless you're from China, you would never know of. They have the largest audience in the world. It's like 1 billion people on their Facebook page or something. And they were all doing a campaign about shark fins that was very effective. And they're working on ivory now. They've been burning ivory. The Chinese government is shifting slowly toward a better relationship with elephants. And it's a race, just like in this film. It's a race.
That's right. And Jackie Chan, Wild Aid actually
got
Jackie Chan for the tiger part of that.
Right. So there maybe a last question or so. I'm not sure what our time is here.
I was curious about the fellow that you interviewed in Bangladesh who was a former freedom fighter and is surrounded by armed guards and knows absolutely nothing about poaching. Who is he? Is he like a local warlord or something like that? Is he the organizer of the poaching that's not going on? Or?
No, I don't believe he's the organizer. He doesn't need poaching by any means. He's the organizer of at least 500,000 fishermen in that region, and his funds, the money comes from that. You could call him a local warlord, but he's really a hero to the people. When he got shot, the prime minister came to his hospital bed because he's a hero freedom fighter for independence of Bangladesh, and now he lives on an island, one of the islands in the Sundarbans, which he's invited me to go to, but I haven't gotten to yet. And I don't think, is he corrupt? Probably, but so is if they weren't corrupt, there's no reason for me to be talking to them, really, because they need to be that powerful. So is there probably a level of corruption there and other things? Yes, just like when I worked with the Burmese dictators. But does that mean I can't use their caring, which is real, in order to get at what the greater good is? No, that's what I do. As I said, I'll do anything.
First of all, great film, and thank you. I have just one question. What do you say to people about all the effort and money that's being spent on I don't know how many tigers are left, but to the tiger extinction, and the lack of money that's going in to help those people that you were talking to that are living in the poverty, and that the fishing is being finished and so on. What?
No, there's an estimated, and people can argue this, but it's a ballpark figure, about 3,200 tigers left in the wild. There's about 15 to 18,000 tigers in zoos around the world, and on game farms, which does nothing for the wild population. The amount of money going into tiger conservation is a grain of sand compared to the amount of aid that has gone in to poverty alleviation and other community goals. That's not what the issue hasn't been money. It's the corruption. The money has been siphoned off. The money, when USAID and the World Bank literally sends hundreds, and Bangladesh has hundreds of millions of dollars of World Bank and USAID funding for communities and poverty alleviation. But the problem is that the people giving that funding don't really care much about where it ends up, because they're not following it and they're not mandating it. And I see this. They know of the corruption. The corruption is siphoning it off, and it's not getting to the people. It's got nothing to do with the amount of money we get for tiger or nature conservation. That's really what part of the problem is. In fact, we're now finally trying to convince, and are convincing to a large extent, World Bank and USAID that part of the way to alleviate poverty and to help these local people, by their own acknowledgement, is to help stabilize their environment. And they realize this. That's from their own mouths. They get it better than more educated people do.
I mean, the question was partly answered by the villagers, who said that, you know, I mean, they live off the forest. They don't mean the forest wouldn't be there and that would be okay. That forest is their lives. So that's the Sundarbans. So if the tiger was gone, that would be the end of them too. So it's a symbiosis.
And that's probably one of the magical and most interesting aspects of the film and the situation there. That's a very unusual ecosystem. It's flooded. You can't build condos there. It has its refugium in every sense. So if you can give those people more opportunity directly in some way or other, perhaps that's if there's a way to kind of jump over the corruption. I don't know if there is a way. That might be one form of conservation, because the ecosystem is probably the most durable thing that will sustain itself in a way if you just give it a little opportunity. I don't know if you feel that way.
I'd like to be heard for a couple of minutes here. The man on my left, Alan, is on the phone to me at midnight sometimes, early in the morning. He's always on the job. He was in Colombia. He was in Thailand. And we need more people like Alan and more cinematographers like Tom, who worked in 120 degrees and came back with some really magnificent shots, some of which you may see in the IMAX next year if we succeed in getting it done. I'm pretty good at getting my things done, but Alan is a powerhouse of an American who believes that a tiger is a charismatic megafauna, and that it's one of the priceless things that we have on Earth, and we simply can't afford to not listen to Alan and not tell our friends about him. And that's the word of mouth goes a long way with a documentary that's coming out like this one early next year.
So help. I assume they can help with the film too. You still need funding to develop the IMAX film, or is that all being? Do you need the crowd to make that happen?
Well, I keep my ears close to the ground and I pick up signals. And Julian Robertson, who financed this picture, invented the hedge fund, and he's set up the Robertson Scholars Program at Chapel Hill in Duke. And he's a marvelous human being who gets out there and gets things done. And if Alan and I had something really well put together, and we took it to him tomorrow, I think he'd probably back it. He's that kind of a person.
Well, bravo to all of you. Great work. Keep it up.